It was a typical Saturday afternoon when Jamal and Tyler walked into the luxury car dealership. They had saved up for months, working part-time jobs, and were finally in the market for their first car. Jamal, a tall and athletic 17-year-old, had always dreamed of owning a car that reflected his hard work. Tyler, his best friend, was more of a tech geek and had a keen interest in high-end cars. They both had different reasons for being there, but they shared one goal: to learn more about the cars that had always seemed out of reach. The dealership had sleek glass windows, immaculate floors, and rows of shiny luxury cars. It looked like the kind of place people with money went to buy cars, not teenagers like Jamal and Tyler, who could barely afford the basics. But they were determined to at least try. They wanted to ask questions, get some information, and just experience the world they had only ever seen in magazines. They were barely through the door when a sales representative, Mr. Carson, looked them up and down. Without saying a word, he gave them a dismissive look before turning away. Jamal and Tyler exchanged an uncomfortable glance, but tried to brush it off. They had been to other dealerships before, and although it wasn't always welcoming, they were used to the awkwardness. The two boys wandered over to a row of luxury sports cars, admiring the polished exteriors, and discussing which one they'd pick if they could afford it. Jamal pointed to a sleek Porsche 911, while Tyler gravitated toward a Ferrari 488 GTB. They were deep in conversation about specs and features when Mr. Carson walked up to them again, this time with a sharp tone. "Can I help you boys with something?" he asked coldly, looking at them as if they didn't belong. Jamal took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Yeah, we were just looking at some of these cars. We wanted to get more information." Mr. Carson smirked, glancing at the cars and then back at the boys. "Well, I don't think you're in the right place for that." Tyler frowned. "What do you mean?" The sales representative's gaze became even more dismissive. "You're wasting your time here. Why don't you go look at something more within your budget?" Jamal could feel the anger bubbling up inside him, but he tried to keep his cool. "We just wanted to look and ask some questions. We're not buying today." But Mr. Carson didn't want to hear it. He took one last glance at the boys and then gestured toward the door. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He said it with such authority, as if it was his decision to make. Stunned, Jamal and Tyler stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to react. They were being kicked out of a dealership for simply being interested in cars. No questions asked, no explanation given. Just a blatant dismissal. "Are you serious?" Tyler finally asked, his voice trembling with frustration. Mr. Carson didn't even respond. He simply turned his back and walked away, leaving the two boys standing there in disbelief. Feeling humiliated and defeated, Jamal and Tyler walked out of the dealership, heads hanging low. They had been treated like they didn't belong, just because of how they looked. Young, black, and seemingly out of place in a luxury car showroom. They couldn't shake the feeling that if they had been different, if they had dressed differently, or maybe looked wealthier, they might have been treated better. Outside, the weight of the moment sank in. Jamal clenched his fists, trying to control his frustration. Tyler walked silently next to him, also stunned by how quickly things had escalated. "I can't believe that just happened," Jamal muttered under his breath, his mind racing. "We were just looking. How can they treat us like that?" Tyler sighed. "I don't know, man. It's messed up, but I guess we just have to brush it off." But Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a bad experience at a dealership. It was a reminder of the prejudices they faced every day, the barriers that were in place simply because of their background, and the disrespect they had just encountered. As they walked away from the dealership, Jamal vowed that things would change. He wasn't going to let this moment define him. He was going to show them all. They'd see that a young black man could have the same opportunities and respect as anyone else. But little did they know, things were about to take a very unexpected turn. The next day was a normal Sunday, and Jamal and Tyler tried to put the events at the dealership behind them. They spent the afternoon at the local park, talking about everything except what had happened the day before. It was clear that both of them were still shaken by the incident, but they didn't want to dwell on it. They were just trying to enjoy a moment of normalcy. As the sun began to set, Jamal's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from his father. "Meet me at the house in an hour. I have something to show you." Jamal didn't think much of it at first. He texted Tyler, letting him know he was going to swing by home, and Tyler agreed to meet him later. As Jamal arrived at his house, he was greeted by his father, Mr. Roberts, a successful businessman with a reputation that extended far beyond their city. Although Jamal had grown up in a well-off family, his father had always instilled in him the value of humility and hard work, never flaunting their wealth. Jamal stepped into the house, his mind still on the events from the dealership. His father, noticing the serious expression on his son's face, gave him a knowing look. "You're still thinking about yesterday, aren't you?" Mr. Roberts asked, motioning for Jamal to sit down with him. Jamal nodded. "Yeah, I can't stop thinking about how we were treated. Just because of how we look, they assume we didn't belong there." Mr. Roberts smiled faintly and patted his son's shoulder. "Son, let me show you something." Jamal followed his father to the driveway, where a sleek Rolls-Royce was parked next to another luxury car. Jamal froze, his eyes widening as he stared at the two pristine vehicles. "Dad, is this? Jamal started, but he couldn't find the words. Mr. Roberts smiled again, a twinkle in his eye. "Yes, son. These are yours." Jamal blinked in disbelief. "What? No way. You're serious?" His father chuckled. "You and Tyler didn't deserve to be treated like that at the dealership. I'm going to show you how the world works. People might judge you based on how you look or where you come from, but don't let that stop you. You've worked hard, and you deserve respect." Jamal stood there for a moment, processing what was happening. His father had just bought him not one, but two Rolls-Royces. But more than that, this wasn't about the cars. It was about teaching him a valuable lesson. "Dad, I don't even know what to say. This is amazing, but I feel like there's more to this than just the cars," Jamal said, his voice full of gratitude and confusion. Mr. Roberts placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "There is more, Jamal. This is about showing you that sometimes you have to demand the respect you deserve. You don't let others define your worth based on appearances. You stand tall, and you make your presence known. And when the time comes, you use what you have to change things for others too." Jamal stood there in awe, feeling both overwhelmed and empowered. His father had shown him that there was much more to success than simply acquiring wealth. It was about using that wealth and influence to break barriers, to show others that they could rise above prejudice, and to demand the respect that they were owed. "This is just the beginning, son," Mr. Roberts said, his voice filled with purpose. "Now go show the world who you really are. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Jamal looked at the two Rolls-Royces parked in his driveway, his mind racing with possibilities. He realized that this wasn't just a lesson about wealth or status. It was about creating an opportunity to make a statement, to change the way people viewed him, and to prove that he wasn't going to let anyone's judgment stop him from succeeding. Later that day, Jamal called Tyler, telling him what had happened. Tyler was equally stunned, but after hearing Jamal's father's words, they both knew that they had just taken the first steps towards something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. As Jamal and Tyler sat down together that evening, they talked about their future. This wasn't just about the Rolls-Royces. It was about shaping their own futures, about demanding respect, and about making sure that they never allowed anyone to hold them back again. The next day, Jamal and Tyler decided to visit the same car dealership that had humiliated them just the day before. This time, however, they weren't just a couple of teenagers walking in with big dreams. They were walking in with a newfound sense of confidence and a powerful lesson in their hearts. Their intentions were clear: to show the world that respect wasn't something to be given based on appearance, but on character, intellect, and worth. As they walked through the dealership doors, the atmosphere felt different. The sleek luxury cars still gleamed under the bright lights, but this time, the air was charged with something far more powerful. The employees who had once dismissed them so casually seemed to notice them immediately. The receptionist smiled warmly at them, and the sales representatives who had previously ignored them now looked at them with curiosity and a touch of respect. Jamal and Tyler approached a row of cars, this time with purpose. They were no longer the boys looking up at the cars with awe. They were in control. As they examined the vehicles, Mr. Carson, the same salesman who had kicked them out the day before, approached them cautiously. "Can I help you, boys?" Mr. Carson asked, his tone more polite than before, though still laced with a bit of skepticism. He didn't recognize them at first, but the air around them was different. They were no longer just two black teenagers. They had a new energy about them, a quiet authority that couldn't be ignored. Jamal looked him straight in the eye, feeling the full weight of his father's lesson settle in his chest. "We were here yesterday," Jamal said, his voice calm but firm. "But we weren't treated with respect." Mr. Carson's face went pale as he recalled the incident. He had underestimated them the day before, assuming they had no business being in the dealership. He realized now that his actions had been wrong, but he didn't know how to apologize. Instead, he stood there uncomfortable, waiting for Jamal to continue. Tyler, who had always been the more outspoken one, spoke up. "We're not here to argue or cause trouble. We just wanted to come back and make sure that people like us don't get treated like we don't belong here." The words hit hard. Mr. Carson didn't know how to respond. The realization of his actions began to weigh heavily on him. This wasn't just a couple of teenagers anymore. This was a moment that would make him rethink how he treated people from now on. Jamal stood tall, his hands in his pockets, looking at the cars with a newfound sense of ownership. "We just wanted to remind you that respect isn't earned through wealth or appearance. It's earned by who you are and what you stand for." Tyler, nodding in agreement, added, "And we'll never let someone make us feel less than we are." For a long moment, there was silence. Mr. Carson stood there, unsure of how to apologize for his earlier behavior. But Jamal and Tyler didn't need an apology. They needed respect, and they were making sure that they were demanding it from this moment forward. Mr. Carson took a deep breath and finally said, "I'm sorry for how I treated you yesterday. That wasn't right." For the first time, the salesman was genuinely acknowledging his mistake. He wasn't just apologizing out of obligation. There was real regret in his voice. He had learned an important lesson from these two young men, a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his career. The boys nodded, accepting the apology without hesitation. They knew that this wasn't about seeking revenge or holding a grudge. It was about learning from the past, demanding the respect they deserved, and moving forward with dignity. "Thank you, Mr. Carson," Jamal said, his voice softer now. "We appreciate it. We just wanted to make sure people understand that everyone deserves respect." Mr. Carson gave them a respectful nod, his tone sincere. "I understand." He turned away, and for the first time, Jamal and Tyler felt that they were truly seen. They walked through the dealership again, looking at the cars, but this time, it felt different. They weren't just observers anymore. They were equal participants in this world of wealth and opportunity, and they knew it. As they left the dealership, the two boys exchanged a look of mutual understanding. They had taken back their power, not with anger, but with dignity. They had taught Mr. Carson and themselves a lesson in respect. Jamal's mind raced with the knowledge that this wasn't just about one dealership or one salesperson. It was about the larger world they lived in. Respect wasn't something that should be earned by appearance, money, or privilege. It was a right, a given, no matter who you were. They left the dealership not just as two young men who had been disrespected, but as two young men who had learned the true power of self-respect and the courage to demand it. The next day, Jamal and Tyler found themselves still reflecting on the events at the dealership. What started as a painful experience had now turned into a powerful lesson about respect and self-worth. They had taken control of their situation, demanded the respect they deserved, and had seen the immediate effects of standing up for themselves. But little did they know, the story wasn't over yet. That afternoon, as they walked down the street from school, they noticed a black Rolls-Royce parked outside the dealership. It was gleaming in the sunlight, catching everyone's attention. Jamal and Tyler both stopped in their tracks, staring at the car in awe. "Isn't that the same dealership?" Tyler asked, pointing to the showroom, where the salesmen were standing by the windows watching. Jamal nodded, his mind already spinning with thoughts. "Yeah, it looks like it's the same place." He walked toward the dealership, his feet heavy with curiosity. But that car, who would buy something like that? As they approached, they saw the door open, and a man stepped out from behind the glass, walking with an air of confidence that was undeniable. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, and he moved toward the Rolls-Royce. opening the door with an easy motion. "Who's that?" Tyler asked. Before Jamal could respond, he heard a voice from behind him. "That would be me." Jamal turned around, and there stood Mr. Roberts, his father, smiling. He looked as polished and composed as ever. The sight of him standing there in front of the dealership, near the same Rolls-Royce, was a shock. "Dad, what's going on?" Jamal asked, still confused. Mr. Roberts chuckled. "Well, it seems like the dealership has been a little more receptive today." He looked at his son and then at Tyler. "I thought it was time for you both to learn how to make a real entrance." Tyler and Jamal stood frozen, unsure of what was going on. "Wait, are you telling me?" Tyler began, his voice trailing off as he processed the situation. "This car is yours?" Mr. Roberts nodded. "Both of them." He smiled, pointing to the other Rolls-Royce parked nearby. "And they're for you, Jamal." Jamal's jaw dropped. "Wait, are you serious?" Mr. Roberts explained how the previous day's experience had inspired him to make a gesture. The cars weren't just about showing off wealth, they were about making a point that Jamal and Tyler deserved to be treated with respect, no matter where they went. And what better way to make that statement than to show up in the same dealership, but on their terms this time? "You've earned this, Jamal," Mr. Roberts said, his voice softening. "Not just because of your grades or your hard work, but because you've learned to stand up for yourself, for your friends, and for what's right." Tyler and Jamal exchanged looks, both of them overwhelmed by what was happening. It felt surreal. They were standing in front of two Rolls-Royces, cars that had once seemed like a distant dream, but now they were their reality. Mr. Roberts handed Jamal the keys to the Rolls-Royce, a symbolic gesture that meant more than just owning a luxury car. It was a lesson in power, respect, and integrity, one that would stay with Jamal forever. "This isn't about showing off," Mr. Roberts continued, his eyes locked onto Jamal's. "This is about understanding that you can have what you want and you can achieve whatever you set your mind to. But it's also about remembering that your worth isn't defined by the car you drive or the clothes you wear. It's about who you are as a person. And that's the message I want you to take with you." Jamal stood there, taking in the weight of his father's words. This wasn't just a gift, it was a reminder. His father was teaching him that true value didn't come from the material things in life. It came from the respect and honor that one earned through hard work, perseverance, and standing tall in the face of adversity. As Jamal and Tyler got into the cars, they both realized that the road ahead was no longer about proving something to others. It was about walking confidently in their own skin, knowing that they had the ability to change the world in their own way. The doors to the dealership opened wide that day, literally and metaphorically, and for the first time Jamal and Tyler felt like they had the world at their feet. The next day, as Jamal and Tyler sat in their new Rolls-Royce, they couldn't help but feel the weight of their actions and decisions. They had proven something to themselves. They were worthy of respect, no matter where they came from or how others saw them. But it wasn't just about the cars or the moment of triumph they had experienced. They knew that true change and success didn't come from what you owned, but from how you used your position to make a difference in the world. The boys had learned an important lesson about standing up for themselves, but they also knew there was more to be done. The experience at the dealership had opened their eyes to the deeper issues of discrimination, prejudice, and inequality that many people, especially young black men, faced daily. And now that they had a platform, a literal platform, they decided to take on a new challenge. Jamal's thoughts turned back to the dealership and the way they had been treated by Mr. Carson. Sure, the apology was sincere, but Jamal and Tyler knew that one apology wasn't enough. There was a much bigger issue at play. They could not allow that moment to be a one-off event. They needed to turn this experience into an opportunity to change the narrative and create awareness about the inequality that black youth faced in high-end establishments and beyond. One afternoon, Jamal took a deep breath and called his father. Mr. Roberts answered, his voice calm and confident, the same way it always was. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," Jamal said, his voice serious. He had always looked up to his father, but now, more than ever, he realized that he had a responsibility, a duty, to use his voice for something bigger. "What's on your mind, son?" Mr. Roberts asked. Jamal paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "I want to do something. I want to start a campaign." He could hear his father's curiosity on the other end of the line. A campaign? What kind of campaign? Mr. Roberts asked, his tone shifting to one of interest. I want to start a movement that raises awareness about how young black men and women are treated in spaces like that dealership. I want people to understand that we can't just be ignored or treated unfairly. We deserve respect, and I want to make sure no one else has to experience what we did. Jamal could feel the weight of his words, the importance of what he was about to do. Mr. Roberts was silent for a moment, and then he spoke. I'm proud of you, son. This is the kind of thinking that will take you far in life. I'll help you however I can. Let's start this movement together. With his father's support, Jamal knew they could make a difference. He began to map out his plan, a campaign that would not only raise awareness, but also create real change. He began drafting speeches, reaching out to local media outlets, and speaking with organizations that advocated for racial equality. The goal was clear: to create a nationwide conversation about how people of color were being treated and to demand respect in all public spaces. Jamal knew it wouldn't be easy, but his drive to make a difference was stronger than ever. It was no longer about the Rolls-Royce. It was about creating an environment where people like him didn't have to prove their worth to anyone. The momentum quickly built, and soon Jamal found himself speaking at rallies, sharing his story, and encouraging others to stand up for themselves. He realized that the impact wasn't just local, it was global. People across the country, even around the world, began to take notice of his message. The campaign's momentum grew, and Jamal's voice became a beacon of hope for many who had felt silenced for far too long. With his father's guidance and his best friend Tyler's support, Jamal took on the biggest challenge of his life. He wanted to be a leader not only for himself but for others who needed a voice in the fight for respect and equality. Jamal had started a movement, but more importantly, he had begun a lifelong journey of empowerment, leadership, and justice. And as he drove his Rolls-Royce through the streets, he realized that true success wasn't defined by the car he drove or the wealth he had. It was about the change he was creating in the world and the legacy he was leaving behind. Months passed, and Jamal's campaign had taken off in ways he hadn't expected. His efforts to raise awareness about racial injustice and inequality had reached a wide audience. His story, his message, had struck a chord with many people. He had become a voice for young black men and women who had been overlooked or dismissed simply because of their appearance or background. His father, Mr. Roberts, had continued to support him every step of the way, providing both financial and emotional backing. Jamal was now speaking at events across the country, advocating for racial equality, and using his story to inspire others to fight for what was right. The moment at the dealership, which had once been a painful memory, had become the catalyst for something much greater. The road to success hadn't been easy. Jamal and Tyler had faced a lot of challenges along the way, but they had never backed down. They had used their pain as motivation, and together they had turned an embarrassing experience into a powerful movement. One evening, Jamal was preparing for his biggest speech yet. The event was being held at a major conference center in the city. Thousands of people were expected to attend, and many more would be watching online. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, mentally preparing for what was to come. Tyler, who had been by his side through the entire journey, walked into the room. "You ready for this?" he asked, a smirk on his face. Jamal smiled back. "I think so. I've got this." Tyler nodded, clapping him on the back. "You've already done the hard part, man. You've shown everyone who you are. Tonight, you just gotta speak your truth." Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another speech. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, treated with disrespect, or dismissed because of their background. As Jamal took the stage that evening, the room fell silent. Thousands of eyes were on him, eager to hear what he had to say. The spotlight shone down, and Jamal looked out over the crowd. For the first time, he wasn't nervous. He was ready. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady and strong. "I'm Jamal Roberts, and today, I'm not just here to talk about the cars we drive or the wealth we have. I'm here to talk about respect. Respect for who we are as individuals, respect for our stories, our dreams, and the journeys we've all taken." Jamal paused for a moment, letting his words settle in. The crowd was silent, listening intently. Yesterday, I was a young man who felt overlooked and dismissed because of my appearance. But today, I stand before you as someone who has learned the true meaning of respect. And I want to remind each and every one of you that you are worthy of that same respect, no matter who you are or where you come from. The audience erupted in applause. Jamal continued, his words flowing with passion. I stand here today not because of the car I drive, but because of the respect I demand for myself and for others who have been treated unjustly. We all deserve to be treated with dignity, no matter our age, our skin color, or our background. And it's time that we start demanding that respect. The crowd stood in solidarity, clapping and cheering for Jamal's words. He had done what many thought was impossible. He had turned a painful experience into a movement that was changing the narrative for people everywhere. As Jamal finished his speech and walked off the stage, he felt a sense of accomplishment that was beyond anything he had ever experienced. He had started a journey that was much bigger than him, a journey that would continue for years to come. His voice had made an impact, and he knew it would continue to do so. With the support of his father, Tyler, and everyone who believed in him, Jamal had proven that you could rise above the prejudice and break through the barriers that society tried to place in front of you. His story was now a testament to the fact that respect and self-worth could never be taken away no matter what. Jamal looked over at Tyler, who was grinning from ear to ear. We did it. Tyler nodded, his eyes filled with pride. Yeah, we did. But it's just the beginning, man. The real work starts now. And with that, Jamal knew his journey was far from over. He had set the foundation for something greater, a legacy that would continue to inspire, empower, and change the world one voice at a time.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.